Okay, welcome to the first ever Sustainability Happy Hour broadcast. My name is Pat Keys. I am the lead scientist at the School of Global Environmental Sustainability at Colorado State University. I would love to introduce my co-host, Micah.
Hello, my name is Micah. I'm the communications specialist for the School of Global Environmental Sustainability. And since that is 15 syllables, you might hear us refer to it as SoGES.
I've never even counted the syllables. That's great.
It's 15. It's a lot.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense why but SoGES itself always feels kind of like a task to say, SoGES. I wish we could just like abbreviate it even more, although I feel like we're already pretty tight there. So you might be wondering, why are we doing something like this? And part of the reason is that one of the biggest things that I miss from the experience of going to work in a physical place is actually bumping into my friends, seeing my colleagues, maybe going out for a beer. So the idea here is that we can have a short amount of time on Friday afternoon and maybe have a chat about sustainability. Like you just wound up at the pub and you see a couple people that you know, and we're going to talk about sustainability. Today we're broadcasting live on twitchtv.com/watersecurity. And so if you have any comments or questions, you can go over there and you can type those in. We'll see them and we'll try and address them in real time. I'm not sure how successful we'll be. But with that, we thought we would just give kind of a brief roundup of some sustainability news. And then after that, we're going to go into an interview with Craig Starger later on, and we'll bring him in here in a minute. And so, Micah, do you want to go ahead and start talking about some sustainability highlights?
Yeah, for sure. So since this is Sustainability Happy Hour and it's a Friday afternoon, and I am indeed a millennial, I would like to start today's conversation with some memes. One article I came across was in the New York Times, and it was called "The Rise of the Coronavirus Nature Genre." And it was talking about the meme that has been going around that you have maybe seen, Pat, the "We are the virus, Earth is healing" meme. And so,
yeah, one of my favorites recently.
Yeah. And so where that kind of came from was a legitimate sense that, the coronavirus is actually good for the earth. Wildlife is returning, rivers are running clear, the air is cleaner. And so people were sincerely posting about, the fact that, humans are the virus, the earth is healing. And there are a lot of issues with that concept, and it's certainly not sustainable. Sustainability is about the environment and the society and the economy, and that includes people. And when millions of people or not millions, when many people are dying from a virus, that's certainly not the way we want to go about lowering emissions.
Right.
And so, as the way memes do, it evolved into a joke. People started to poke fun at this concept, and now you see images, and I wonder if we have the capacity to even pull a couple images
let's see. I'm going to do this, and then we'll probably pull up something that's wildly inappropriate. But let's just give it a shot. So, what do you think I would search on Twitter?
We are the virus.
We are the virus.
Oh, and then my two favorite ones are, you'll see that same tagline, the earth is healing, we are the virus.
This is one of my favorites.
With cows in the ocean.
With cows in the ocean. Cows are returning to cows are returning to the sea. Nature is healing. We are the virus.
Prayer hands.
Prayer hands. So I really I know that we're not supposed to laugh, but I just this kind of thing just made me with everyone on lockdown, the dinosaurs are returning to the park. It's beautiful. We are the virus. I don't know. We have to figure out how to laugh right now. The world is in such a really crappy place. I don't know. We just have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the thing that I like about the meme is that it's making fun of this idea. It's saying, look, this is ridiculous. This is not a sustainable way to be sustainable, if that makes sense.
No, I get it.
So anyways, that was just an interesting article that I came across, and I always enjoy some memes, so thought we'd share that. Another big thing that has happened recently is Earth Day turned 50 years old.
That's right.
And so there's a lot of media out there, looking at the past 5 decades of Earth Day and
Yeah.
what has stayed the same and what has changed. Pat, what do you think? Have you kind of read any of that information?
No, I haven't read any of it, honestly. I think what were you gonna say?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the biggest themes that I've seen is that, it's comparing Earth Day in 1970 to Earth Day today, and the political polarization just simply wasn't present in 1970.
Yeah.
It was a nonpartisan issue, and now it's one of the most partisan issues, which I just think is really interesting to think about.
Yeah, and actually, kind of building off of that, there's a whole, like, the consciousness of where people were in 1970 versus where we are now is also wildly different. I mean, in 1970, the kind of perception about the Vietnam War was on a turning point where we were starting to question kind of the prevailing message that we were getting about why the United States was in Vietnam. There was in some ways there was almost like a little bit more of a unification around some of those kind of ancillary issues around war. So that when it came to thinking about some of these big kind of collective action problems, there was almost some tendrils of unity there that might not have been there. But I mean, now it's really hard to see that. Although, I mean, there's always this gap, right? Like there's this gap between public perception of how much we agree collectively, like in the United States, about action on climate change, and it's much more than a majority, right? It's significantly more than 50% of people in the United States think we ought to be doing a lot more about climate change than we are now. But there's this perception and kind of prevailing media and other resources that make us think that maybe it's a little bit more contentious than it might actually be. And maybe that's like a bright point or like a silver lining to thinking about kind of the difference between 1970 versus now 2020, is that there's hopefully going to be, since there is that actual sentiment that we ought to be doing more, that maybe that's still an opportunity. We might not be able to do anything this year or the next, but there's still that opportunity that people still are agreeing in some way. We just have to find a way to trace that agreement to the people that can do much about it.
Right. One interesting thing that I learned from reading an article by, it was more of an essay from Thomas Dietz. He's on the SoGES External Advisory Board and is a professor at Michigan State University. And he was reflecting on some of the things that have changed and some of the things that have stayed the same, and how in 1970 the idea, like conservation of land and wildlife, was an important idea, but there wasn't yet like a tie to how that impacted human health, and how now we see that connection a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in these ways that we can converge on these issues.
Yeah, when you think about the perception of what sustainability included in 1970, it's sort of wildly different now. Kind of our sense of how big that tent is now, it's quite a bit bigger now in terms of who counts, who doesn't. What do you think about trying to go on to thinking about some like, what are some kind of other sustainability news, miscellaneous sustainability news this week?
Yeah, so I get a lot of aggregation newsletters, and a couple of headlines that stood out to me were California lifts ban on plastic bags amid virus concerns.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the idea that folks are bringing in their reusable shopping bags into stores could lead to more spread of the virus, and it's definitely a contentious issue.
Yeah.
Some people are for it, some people are not. Some people are saying that this is a ploy by the plastic industry to try to sort of like boost themselves back up after sort of being battered by all of these different plastic bag bans.
Yeah.
Couple of more positive pieces of news that I found was one is oil companies are collapsing, but wind and solar energy keep growing. That one was in the New York Times. And it was really interesting. It listed a lot of reasons as to why, as fossil fuel prices are going down because of the pandemic, why solar and wind are becoming more valuable in a lot of ways.
Right. Did they talk at all about, in those articles, did they talk at all about how nuclear power fits into that? Because that's sort of like a weird, it's not fossil fuels, but it's not, obviously renewables. So
yeah, no, it didn't. But that's an interesting piece.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then oh, go ahead.
No, please.
The other headline that I thought was really interesting, especially because I really don't know anything about the realm of investing or the stock market. Personally, that all just scares the pants off me. But so this headline is, the world's most profitable hedge fund is now a climate radical. It's an article from Bloomberg, and it's about this index fund TCI, which is led, owned, I'm not exactly sure how that all works, by his last name is Han, and he basically is using his wealth and his power from being this investment mogul to try to pressure companies and other CEOs and hedge funds to start backing climate change policies. If your company isn't going to be serious about climate change, I'm going to pull all my stocks from you, is kind of what the article was saying.
And that's a really interesting kind of spin on the whole idea of a lot of organizations are trying to divest, that is to take away their investment dollars from companies that are maybe fossil fuel intensive or some other issue, and put it in something that aligns more closely with their value set. So it's interesting to see the other side of that coin, where you've got the people that are essentially in charge of making all these investment decisions and maximizing returns now saying, maybe we ought to be following that tune as well, or thinking about it at least in a long. But it looks like they're thinking about it more from a risk management perspective, perhaps. Maybe less so let's align our value set with being sustainable and taking care of the earth, but more saying, look, if we don't do something about climate change, it's really going to hurt our bottom lines. And I mean, that's not wrong. It's a recognition of the seriousness of the issue, just from a different perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
That's really interesting. Okay, so we are already 15 minutes into this broadcast, which means we need to get our guest out here. So I'm going to go ahead and click a button, which probably will turn the whole thing off, but I hope not. And here we go. Ready, set, voila. Wow, look at this. Hey.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the pub, Craig.
Thanks. I just had a protein shake. I know that doesn't count.
Okay, no, that's fine.
I don't have a drink with me right now.
You don't have to drink beer. That's fine. You can just have water or a protein shake.
Mine's actually a kombucha.
Oh, okay.
I love kombucha. I used to make my own, then it kind of took over. So I had to, it just grows and grows and grows.
I was wondering about that because I know that you made your own kombucha. And what is it called? The thing at the bottom?
SoGES.
The SoGES? So
yeah, it's a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast.
It's an acronym?
Yeah.
I kind of forgot it was an acronym.
I thought it was just the name that somebody came up with. It's called the SoGES. So wait a second. When it takes over, what does that actually mean?
It just means it grows, and then you have to get another container and split it in half, and then you have twice the kombucha. Then it grows again. You cut it in half. Now I have 6 pickle jars full of kombucha, and I'm pretty much the only one who drinks it. So
ideally, you give those cuttings to friends, and then they can make their own.
Yeah.
It's kind of like doing a sourdough starter.
Which
so actually, I would gladly
right
take half your SoGES, Craig.
Okay, well, I don't have any now, unfortunately, but if I decide to start again.
I know it's living, right? So it's an alive
Yep.
fungus?
Well,
what is it?
symbiotic culture of
Oh
bacteria
yeah,
and
right. You
yeast.
said that. SCOBY. Okay. But so when you cut it in half and then you have to split it up, couldn't you just throw half away?
Yeah, you could.
Is that? But that's
I've,
probably frowned upon in the kombucha community.
I've done that too. I mean, I've
Yeah.
composted it, and then it
We
still
won't
just
tell
grows
anybody.
and grows and grows.
Wait, you composted it?
Yes.
I bet that was like a good, like, interesting boost. I bet your compost was like, what is this?
Maybe. I mean, I didn't really do a scientific study of it.
Okay, so
I
before
do
we
all kinds of
proceed,
stuff in the compost.
before we keep talking about kombucha brewing, you should probably say, like, who are you? So who are you?
Well, thanks for having me on. First of all, it's a great honor to be on the first Sustainability Happy Hour. My name is Craig Starger, and I'm a research scientist at SoGES, which you have identified already.
You don't say.
The School of Global Environmental Sustainability, on the same hallway under normal conditions as
Under
Pat.
normal conditions. That's right.
But
yeah, this is the kind of conversation we could typically
nice to hang out with you guys again.
Yeah. Okay, so you're a research scientist. What's your background?
I've been working at SoGES for about 4.5 years, which is kind of a long time compared to other places I've been. I've had kind of a varied career over the years with lots of different changes and moves. My background is in ecology and evolutionary biology. My PhD is in that field. And I specialized in coral reef ecology specifically, and conservation genetics and evolutionary biology and genetics.
But where?
Well, my PhD was from Columbia University in New York City.
No, I don't. I mean, where were you doing this research?
I did most of my research through graduate and postdoc in Southeast Asia, which happens to be the global center of marine biodiversity, meaning there's more species of corals, fishes, lobsters, and other marine animals in kind of Indonesia, Philippines area called the Coral Triangle, more there than anywhere else in the world. So a lot of my research, this was mostly in the early 2000s, was around trying to figure out why Southeast Asia was the center of biodiversity for marine life. So we did that through population genetics, evolutionary biology, lots of scuba diving and DNA sampling. So that was kind of my first career and background in science. Then after about 10 years of doing that, I completely made a 180 and entered the world of science policy through a fellowship with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS. And they have a fellowship program that brings scientists into the federal government in many different capacities, but kind of generally as science advisors. So I worked for the federal government in Washington, D.C. for 2 years, and then in Bangkok, Thailand for 2 years, for both the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, working on both policy and programs around biodiversity conservation, specifically still in the theme of marine biodiversity, ocean conservation, and sustainable fisheries.
If there was like one thing that you did that you would want to tell people about that you did in that work, what would it be?
My greatest achievement by far in the government side of my work was the development of a program for USAID called the Oceans and Fisheries Partnership. It was a $19 million 5-year program that just ended a few months ago. I think like maybe even just one or 2 months ago. I just got their final newsletter. It was a 5-year program for combating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, or IUU fishing, in Southeast Asia, and taking an approach around seafood traceability specifically. And it was really fortuitous and kind of serendipitous because all of the political and private sector interests aligned, both in the US and in our partnership countries in Southeast Asia, around this idea that we had to stop illegal fishing in Southeast Asia. It hurts the locals, it hurts the international market, it hurts American producers. It was really just a perfect alignment of interests. And
when you say like perfect alignment, to me, I'm like, that never happens. So
right.
How rare were the circumstances that were in place that were the precondition for that to happen? How rare do you think that was?
Well, I was only with the agency for a few years, but my my director had been at USAID for 30 years at that point, and he said he has never seen this type of political will
Wow.
behind an initiative. And at the time, John Kerry was the Secretary of State and had a very personal, specific interest in ocean conservation. And Secretary Kerry even started a series of conferences called the Our Ocean Conferences. The
Wow.
first one was at the State Department in Washington, I believe in 2014. And even though he's not the secretary anymore, those Our Ocean Conferences are still happening around the world. Other governments have picked up on it, and it's an annual thing.
Well, that's great.
So I haven't been to one. You kind of have to be invited,
Okay.
and you kind of have to be a head of state. But
This time. There's time.
yeah, good. There's still time. You're right. There's still time. But nevertheless, it was kind of just a very just good timing issue. I had a great set of colleagues. We had significant funding at the time under the Obama administration, and Secretary Kerry had a personal interest in our project. And it really kind of demonstrated to me at the time being in the right place at the right time with political will. And when the people at the top want something to happen, it happens, especially in the government.
That's great.
So,
okay, so you were diving around in Indonesia, which just sounds amazing. And then
can I ask a question? Can I backtrack for a second? You said you wanted to know why that part of East Asia, Indonesia, was so biodiverse, and what did you find?
Well, as in all great scientific inquiries, the answer is it depends.
Nice.
So there are a number of different hypotheses around why Southeast Asia is the most biodiverse marine region in the world, just around the same way that the Amazon is the most terrestrial biodiverse region in the world. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Southeast Asia is the intersection between both two continents and two ocean basins. So the Pacific Ocean on the northeast, the Indian Ocean on the southwest, the Asian continent on the northwest, and the Australian continent on the southwest. It just makes it kind of the most tectonically active and dynamic oceanographically and biochemically, and kind of islands are rising and falling as sea level changes and Pleistocene glaciers retreat. And so it was just a very dynamic environment for many millions of years, and it still is. So just that level of kind of constant disturbance and recovery of ecosystems has just driven a tremendous amount of biodiversity, and people call it sometimes the engine of marine biodiversity. There's also a lot of really unique and marginal habitats for marine life, like conditions of geomorphology and chemistry and temperature that don't exist anywhere else in the world. And so it's an opportunity for endemic species and to evolve and find niches that don't exist anywhere else in the world.
I was just thinking
very
about that.
Dynamic and heterogeneous environment.
There's so many islands, right? I mean, and they're shaped differently. They're oriented in different ways. Like when you think about Indonesia, it's like Sumatra is kind of slanted, at least, north, south, east, west.
Yep.
Then you've got Java going horizontally. And then what's the one is it Sulawesi? That's sort of, I don't even know what shape
like a
that
letter
is.
K.
Shaped like a letter K. There's so much shape heterogeneity that it makes it possible for those different pockets to grab different aspects of, like you said, like the two different continents and the two different ocean basins. They can all of a sudden sort of capture it in different ways.
There's a tremendous amount of variation in the coastline of Indonesia. It's not like a straight up and down north-south like the coasts of the United States or Australia. It's just very, very intricate. And with the rising and falling of sea levels over thousands of years, there's varying levels of connectivity among the islands. Islands rise out of the ocean through volcanic activity or through sea levels falling and rising. So it's just a very dynamic place. And you can, my postdoc advisor was from, at the time, Boston University. He said, if I throw a fishing line into, off the coast of Woods Hole, Massachusetts, I have a 1 in 5 chance of knowing what I'm going to catch. If I throw a fishing line off the boat in Indonesia, I have a 1 in about 3,000 chance of guessing what I'm going to catch. There's just no idea, and there's so much of it is unexplored as well, because not only Indonesia and the Philippines, but Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, these are some of the, developing countries, and also out as you get into the Pacific, some of the least developed countries in the world as far as economy and science goes. So there's really very little scientific exploration and knowledge. So even though we do consider it the center of biodiversity, we still hardly know anything about it.
Which that's a perfect segue, because we've got a rapidly changing world right now, right? We're in the Anthropocene, which is like the human epoch, the human age. And now you work for an organization that's sort of tasked with managing sort of the science of the Anthropocene, right?
Exactly.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So since coming to CSU about 4.5 years ago, actually it's 4.5 years tomorrow. I just looked that up. I started November 2nd, 2015. So for that entire time, I've been working as CSU's representative to an international network called Future Earth. This is a sustainability research network. It's not exactly an organization because it's just a network of academic and research institutions, of which CSU is a part. CSU is actually a host institution of Future Earth. And the way I kind of describe Future Earth is, if you know what SoGES is, what SoGES tries to do for CSU, which is to connect researchers from different disciplines to work on multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary projects, Future Earth aims to do the same thing for the world. So a big task, an enormous task,
Yeah.
but we have dozens of institutions and thousands of research scientists, individuals, projects, and universities, as well as other types of research institutes and non-academic partners. And we support all of these groups to develop and to develop interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research projects. And we do this through a number of different ways, from grants programs to publications to conferences up until now, although we still have plans, hopefully in the future for conferences. But we just take a very, diverse approach to how to make this happen. Sustainability is science as a field is relatively new. I know, Pat, you have a PhD in sustainability science.
No big deal. No big deal.
It is a thing, but still, it's hard to say that there's a clear methodology to it. I would say, we take lots of different approaches.
There's not.
We publish a magazine called the Anthropocene Magazine, which is also a website, a very excellent resource for translating science into, public format, similar to other types of popular science magazines. I manage a program through CSU called Pegasus, which stands for the Program for Early Stage Grants Advancing Sustainability. And the Pegasus program is open typically to global teams from all around the world to work on sustainability challenges. And I modeled some of the early Pegasus programs around the SoGES program, the Global Challenge Research Teams, the GCRTs. So I'm trying to, through the Future Earth Global, trying to take some of the great lessons of SoGES and expand them globally. That's
a really cool idea of how, you use the analogy of sort of Future Earth tries to do sort of what SoGES is doing on a CSU scale, up to the global scale, which is like crazy, and I can't even imagine that. But then also to think about how you can take, the lessons can go both ways, right? And how you can model sort of the lessons learned from one of these programs like Pegasus that funds these small science projects around the world, these small collaborative science projects, and how can you bring that learning back to an organization like SoGES? That's really neat. Okay, so just to be cognizant of everybody's time, we are all in this crazy situation, right? Like we're all working like isolated at home, more or less. Like maybe we go out occasionally for a walk or a run or to go to the grocery store or whatever, but we're at home. So personally, I've spent more time at home in the last, I don't know what day I'm on, 47 or 48. We've got like a little counter that's kind of insane. But so I want to hear what's one like remarkable, hopefully good thing that has happened. It doesn't have to be about work, but something that's kind of remarkable or good that's happened during this shelter in place, during this time where we've all spent way more time at home than any of us expected to do. So for you, Craig, what's something that's happened that that's like shareable?
I would say that, ever since I got a real job, I guess, as a postdoc, I've never worked from home. I've always had a place to go, whether it was a lab
Yeah.
or an office. I mean, even in graduate school, I had a lab. So I did a lot of my dissertation writing at home, but I've always had a place to go. And I never thought that I would like working at home. I always thought there would be too much distraction, that, I would just, that I would much prefer to go to work. But pleasantly surprised to find that I do enjoy working at home a lot.
Yeah.
There's not too much of a distraction, because fortunately my wife is taking care of our kids for most of the day, and they're really kicking butt on the homeschooling. They usually finish their assignments by noon. My daughter is reading Harry Potter,
Oh, wow.
which I believe is a 5th grade reading level, and she's just finishing the 1st grade.
Wow.
So she's like years ahead.
Yeah, that's great.
So I'm really just I'm surprised in a good way of how well we've adapted.
That's great.
And I know that other people are not having it so easy. So I just feel very fortunate and lucky. And I hope that we as a society can adapt as well as
totally.
I have in my house.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, since you used to work in policy, you're familiar with this idea of like an elevator speech, right? Like you have, you realize that all of a sudden you get in an elevator, and that's like John Kerry or Obama or the president or whoever, somebody important within kind of your job. You have this unique opportunity to say something to. So right now you have a tremendously unique opportunity to be on the inaugural live stream of the broadcast. So what would you say in your little elevator pitch about anything? You got full permission here, hopefully about sustainability. What would you say, like in an elevator pitch to our vast international audience right now?
Well, first, before I give to the pitch, I'll say that I was listening in ahead of time, and I heard you talking about Earth Day and, animals taking over, and how that's not necessarily, real, or,
cows returning to the ocean.
Right. But what I would say is that, this pandemic is really opening our eyes to what life in the Anthropocene might be like. I don't think we're going to snap back to normal anytime soon. If we do come back to normal, it's going to take a long time. But I hope that this crisis will lead to a more resilient Earth system and serve as an opportunity for us to rebuild along a more sustainable path than the one that we've been on. I know that lots of people are hurting. Lots of small businesses are closing. Companies are shutting down. But I hope that when recovery happens, it's not back to business as usual, that we recognize this. And not only are we prepared for the next pandemic, because there will be more, but we're prepared for other global challenges as well.
That's perfect. I'm convinced. I'm John Kerry, so
and
I'm here.
Next week when you see my memo, please approve the $40 million program.
That's exactly right.
I've been working on for the last 3 years.
That was perfect. We didn't even set that up. That was like a perfect pitch for hope. That gave me hope. It helped me think about the future. That was excellent.
Good.
Okay, so I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Craig, for joining us today on this broadcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. And I think so. We will let you go. Let's see how this works. Toodaloo, Craig.
Bye, Craig. It's nice to see you.
And we're just going to go ahead and wrap up with a few announcements, right?
Yeah. So we've got a couple of SoGES announcements in store for you. The first is related to sort of what Craig was just talking about with the pandemic and sustainability. SoGES has a new webpage up called Together Apart, Sustainability Connections to COVID-19. And it's a project that has been really interesting to be working on. We're just sort of aggregating and sharing articles and talking with all the different people we're connected to here at SoGES to see the ways that COVID-19 is a sustainability issue, which we kind of talked about before, how it's impacting so many different sectors. So I would really encourage you to check out that page. We've also recently announced our Global Challenges research teams and our resident fellows.
Is that on the website?
Yeah, it should be.
Let's go check it out.
So we've got 3 Global Challenges research teams this year and 2 resident fellows. And one really interesting and cool thing is that this year the GCRT funding is going to be for 2 years instead of 1, which is what it has been in the past. And that's so that the teams can better execute their planned work and articulate their accomplishments.
So these are the current teams. So we've got 3 teams: reuse, efficiency, packaging with analytics and for customized knowledge, repack, resilient industry supply chains, risk. We've got some acronyms, though the last one doesn't have an acronym, but that doesn't mean it's not good. Measuring carbon footprint of alternative business models in the fashion industry. This is cool. They're sort of occupying different aspects of sustainability.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the GCRTs, and then we've got some resident fellows, right?
Yep. We've got Ed Hall. He's a professor in the Department of Ecosystem Science and Sustainability. And then Johnny Plastini in the Department of Art and Art History. And their little profiles on there are describe their work, and they've got some really cool projects in store. So I'm excited to see that. And
so you can just hop over to the website and check those out. All right. Oh yeah, and then one thing we should mention right at the end of our broadcast is that it's the end of the semester now, the end of the spring semester for 2020, but that means that we're gearing up for the fall semester already. So we're thinking about registration for new classes, GES courses, both undergraduate and graduate. And so if you're interested in any of those classes, we'll have some more information in the notes after the broadcast, but go ahead and hop over to the website and you can find out more about the different classes that are going to be offered this fall.
And if you are, I'll just plug, if you are an undergraduate thinking about declaring the minor, they figured out ways to do all that paperwork online. So don't let this virtual environment deter you from contacting our academic advisor.
Right. You can just hop over to the website, go to education training, minor and global in GES, and there's all the information there, contact information, etc.
Yep. Thank goodness for electronic signatures.
Okay, so we should wrap things up now. This has been an amazing, awesome broadcast. I think our viewership is up to like 10,000 at this point, so this is just phenomenal. But I want to thank you, Micah, for all of the excellent curation and excellent hosting duties today.
My pleasure, and thank you, Pat.
No problem.
For getting this all set up and kicked off.
That's right. And so the next broadcast is probably going to be either a week from today or 2 weeks from now. And stay tuned. We will announce the guest soon. So make sure to follow. You can find us on the web page, probably on the Together Apart web page at SoGES. And so with that, again, we are. My name is Pat Keys. My co-host is
Micah Bennett.
And we are from the School of Global Environmental Sustainability. Thank you for coming to the inaugural broadcast.
That stands for Sustainability Happy Hour.
Oh yeah, I should say that. Sustainability Happy Hour. If I get rid of this, we can even see it over there.
It's a secret.
It makes it sound like it's a secret. It's not a secret. Go ahead, tell your friends. We're all hungry for some interaction with other humans. And so, well, maybe we're not all. But
many of us are.
Many of us are. And so this is an opportunity to just hang out. And then next time around, we'll probably have more of the comments active so that there's a little bit more capability to interact with us if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. Now what?